Shall we begin? The dominion of sin and darkness. This is what we will be talking about in this episode. If you read closely chapters 3 to 6 of the book of Genesis, you will get a very dark and dismal picture of the destruction of sin in human life. So in chapter 3, we have seen already that Adam and Eve have committed sin and thereby have alienated themselves from God. And so they are naked and full of shame. And so God then resolves this, as we've seen, by making a messianic promise. And the promise is that through Adam and Eve's progeny, namely our Blessed Mother, who will be the second Eve, and her progeny, who will be Jesus, God will restore us in our image and likeness, taking us back to its pristine creation. In other words, God is saying very clearly, despite the introduction of sin into human life, I will remain steadfast in my commitment to my decision to have created you in my image and likeness. But let us look then at the terrible degradation and destruction that sin is now causing in Adam and Eve and their descendants. So, already in chapter 3, God is saying you can no longer live in paradise, and so you are being expelled. And so you can see the sharp contrast between the environment that they had in paradise and now the environment that they will have on being expelled. And God starts to describe to them what this environment will be. Eve will now bear children with much pain in childbirth. Uh, as we saw earlier, children were the gift of God and they were an expression of God's own decision to have created us in His image and likeness. So, children are the product of God working together with a human couple to produce a baby. The fleshly material coming from the parents and the soul coming from God. So the creation of children through childbirth was supposed to be a very happy event, a joyful event, a painless event. Now, humans, women, mothers will give birth in pain. And then Adam, who in the garden was a gardener, was a farmer, uh, with no pain, with great joy, with great enjoyment, now will be laboring with the sweat of his brow. And nature and the soil will no longer be on friendly terms with him. And then God goes on to say, you had full access to the tree of life in the garden. Now you are banned from access to the tree of life, making it very clear that now Adam and Eve on their own, because they are in sin, they are incapable then of sharing in God's very own life, the tree of life. See? Then you see the consequences of the dominion of sin and darkness in human life. In chapter 4, Cain is very jealous of his brother Abel. Abel is living a God-fearing life. And we know this because whenever he offers God a sacrifice of one of his lambs from his flock, as he is a shepherd, God is very pleased with his offering. So you can see, even in the midst of sin, there are humans who are dedicated and devoted and committed to God and are living according to a right conscience. So God is very pleased with Abel's sacrifice. Not so with Cain's sacrifice. Cain is a farmer. And so when he offers the first produce of his harvest, God is not satisfied because Cain has sin in his heart. And then when Cain complains, God says to him very clearly, I cannot accept your sacrifice because your sacrifice is supposed to express your dependence on me, your obedience to me, which is not present in your heart, and so I cannot accept your sacrifice. Cain is upset. He's full of jealousy and anger, both against God as well as his brother. And so one day he invites his brother to take a walk, and in the fields he murders his brother. And then he's complaining to God that now there's a mark on his forehead so that no matter where he goes, his life is endangered because he is a murderer. Instead of taking responsibility, instead of moving into repentance, Cain is full of self-pity and complaint. Once again, God in his largesse says, I will make sure to protect you. Once again, you see God's generosity and largesse. And this saga of sin and darkness continues on and gets so bad that in chapter 6 of Genesis, which is the only place where God seems to be regretting his decision to create humans, because he sees very clearly that they are hell-bent on destroying themselves. From what we know of God's revelation and action through his plan of salvation, both in the Old and in the New Testament, that God did not have a regret, but it was the sacred author's way of saying how terrible, how dismal, how foreboding, and how destructive the history of sin is in human lives. And so God, in a way, initiates a new creation by destroying all that is evil through the great flood, and then restoring creation through Noah and his descendants who are in covenant with God. And so it's as if God over and over starts the act of creation. Because, as I said over and over, God will never renege on his decision to have created us in his image and likeness. And then gradually, from Noah's descendants, we will have Abram, and God will enter into a powerful covenant relationship with him that we will see in a subsequent episode. And so, despite this terrible story of sin that we experience in our own lives and see it being displayed all around us, all over the world, God is telling us to trust him and that he will keep writing straight on our very crooked lines and keep drawing us back to him. And our prayer is, our hope is that we will abide by God's invitation and return to him. And this profound return is then seen in Jesus. And so Jesus then makes it very easy for us to return to God through a life of repentance, gratitude, praise, and adoration of God in covenant union with him. God bless you.
Making Great Saints is brought to you by Our Lady's Healing Center. For more information about our healing program, please visit OurLadiesHealingCenter.com.